Okay, with Christopher Newhard, Little Empty Boxes is the feature film, played at the Documentary Film Festival, a personal film about dementia. So your co-director, his mom was battering a mysterious form of dementia, and that's what the film's about. It's about Kathleen and her experiences, and then kind of the macro story of like about kind of medicine and your diet and lifestyle, how it affects our brains. And so you have the like individual journey, the emotional journey of an individual who are experiencing, but you also there is a bigger picture kind of thematic happening in the film as well, I guess, right?
Absolutely. Max and his mom were inseparable. They were two peas in a pod. And when she started developing some odd symptoms of memory loss and struggling with issues with her body, they went through a whole series of time where they were getting tests and trying to figure out what's going on. And it is really a pretty crazy but very relatable story about caregiving for loved ones, and kind of what happens when you go into like go mode when a loved one starts having real medical issues.
Especially something like this where they're eventually they forget who you are in a sense,
Yeah,
right? Like that's the word that's so painful. I can't even imagine.
yeah, it gets to be a little. I have dementia within my own family, which is why I'm very invested in this film, and especially as a co-director. But it is something that, like, you know, I don't really, I think the movies often misportray dementia and Alzheimer's. It's not like, I mean, there's obviously there are cases where like you are literally talking to somebody for the first time ever, even though like a parent, and every time you have a conversation, they ask who you are. Like that obviously exists, but the more broader spectrum of cases is just the inability to remember how to do basic life tasks, how to function. Those are the things that really are a lot harder to deal with than simply remembering people.
Yeah, 100%. So tell me about, okay, so how did this film come about? Because you're like you said, you're what's first of all, what's your relationship with Max? Have you guys worked together previously? Is this your first film together?
Sure, this is our first film together. I met Max for this movie. Max
Okay.
had started working on this film, 10, 11 years ago at this point, and was filming basically his everyday life with his mother when she started developing dementia, and he left Los Angeles and moved to New York to be with her and help take care of her. And in that process, he set out to create a movie. Um, what happened was he ended up, after his mother, Kathy, inevitably passed away. He had created, sort of a rough cut of the film,
Okay.
and he didn't really like it. And it's also really hard, and I know this from experience, but like working on a film about your own life, and especially about like your mother,
Mhm.
it's almost like impossible to do. Like you can't really make the key decisions on like what to cut from the film. Like it's kind of hard to justify, I need to remove this scene, even though I love this scene of my mother, right? Like that's an impossible like task to be, given. So anyway, we got connected through some mutual friends, and I flew out to LA to meet him, and he asked me to take a look at, his rough cut. And um, I immediately saw that there was just like the most amazing um, moments and footage that was captured. And like Kathy is just like the best. Like I just fell in love with her immediately. Um, but I also realized that like the film he had made was not authentic. It was not, it was trying to be a medical movie. And the reality is it's not a medical movie. It's a movie about a son
Yeah.
trying to save his mom. And so I started over. And then, I just said, give me the hard drive. This isn't like a paid gig or anything. Just I want to do this. And I took the hard drive and I spent, almost 3 years just making another movie out of all the raw footage. And it
Wow.
took it took like 6 weeks just to watch. There was like almost 2,000 hours of footage. It took 6 weeks just full-time job sitting and watching video clip after video clip after video clip of everything. I feel like and by the time that was done, I'd only met Max once, but I feel like I feel like it was like my brother. Like I'd lived his entire life. It was all of his home movies, all of like,
Yeah.
when he's a teenager with his first video camera, like everything. I felt like I knew everything that ever happened to him. It was so wild to watch an entire person's life in home movies because they truly filmed everything. And then just be like, okay. And I started over and I made a movie, and we just went back and forth on like different versions of different cuts and different scenes.
Yeah.
And the first version of the movie was like almost 3.5 hours long because it wasn't even my mother, and I felt bad removing anything.
Yeah.
Um, but we just kept cutting away, trimming the fat, making it as good as possible, and that's where it is today. Finally, an hour and 39 minutes. It was the shortest I could possibly, you know, allow.
Well,
Because if you take anything else out of it, I think that you start to remove the voice. And I think the really important thing about Little Empty Boxes is it's kind of the first dementia film ever to give somebody with dementia a voice in the film. It's
mhm.
almost every dementia documentary that's ever been made, and I watched a lot of them when I
Yeah.
started on this film, is they all are like the perfectly healthy person filming the dementia person. And there's like, it's not judgment and it comes across as empathy often, but that person doesn't get to speak for themselves
Yeah.
in like any of the movies.
Or
Um,
there's the cases where like they like I think it's a Julianne Moore movie where she gets the diagnosis and then like she basically says thank you, I love you to everybody before before it gets synced, like it gets worse for her, and then the
yeah,
next scene is that she's bad. So there's that gray area that we don't really see, I guess,
exactly.
in the
Yeah.
movies, right?
And especially in documentaries, like I think that people have really shied away from reality in documentaries. There's a lot of like skewing and biases and things, and we wanted to keep it just vulnerable and authentic. Um, you know, it's really interesting because my mother-in-law passed away last year, and she struggled with dementia the last 3 years of her life, and she developed dementia while I worked on this movie. And so I suddenly had a very
That's
realistic
a
person.
weird coincidence. Like that's an unfortunate coincidence, I
It's
guess, right?
very unfortunate, but when I flew home from seeing Max and meeting him, I watched the footage. I started to get an idea in my head of what this movie could be. And then she fell down the steps, had to get surgery to replace a broken hip, and came out of surgery with late stage dementia. And suddenly had to be like full nursing home, change of life, everything. And it's a world rocker, man. Like if people don't understand what dementia does to a family. And so suddenly I had this experience of like I wasn't on the outside, I was on the team immediately of going, this film needs to have everything that I wish I knew about dementia, uh, but also not be overwhelming, but
Yeah.
also, this is what it's like to take care of somebody dealing with this. Like you just have to not give up ever.
Yeah.
And that's what we made. And I'm proud of that.
Well, you can't tell two movies at the same time, right? So like the way you're describing it, I'm paraphrasing what you were saying before, is that he was trying to make a movie about like what dementia does. He was trying to tell like the big picture story,
Yeah.
and which is in your film, but at the same time, it has to be about his mom. It has to be the love story between his mom and his son. That's what connects the audience, right?
Yeah.
And then when
Yeah.
you give this information, we're gonna take it in because we're already connected to the film. But if you start giving us, start educating us and not entertaining us or showing us the
Yeah.
love story,
Yeah.
right? I
It's a
think that's
fine line to walk because it's
yeah,
so emotional. Like the movie's so like delicate at
yeah,
times. And you feel like you shouldn't even be watching some of this footage. Like it's so raw.
yeah,
Uh, when
hundred
she like
percent.
wakes, it's like the rainstorm comes and it's like the middle of the night and she comes barging into the living room talking to Max, and she is like very, very disoriented. And like that scene, like Max just takes the camera and just puts it on the couch next to him basically while he
Yeah,
talks to her. And like I don't know how you to do that. Like when I was dealing with that in my own life, I didn't have the fortitude to like turn a camera on and film these moments because it was so hard to deal with. So the fact that he pushed through and remembered in hundreds of these hard times to just film them and just, capture what he could. It's pretty insane what happened and what's in this film. I
Do you
feel
ever,
like it's a rare, very rare movie.
did you ever ask him like what motivated him to do that? Like that's some mental energy there
Yeah.
to like deal with your mom and also make sure that the camera's on, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the funny thing is he never he never really was in a time when he wasn't filming her.
Yeah.
When I say that the Lugaveres filmed everything, like I'm not kidding. Like I feel like a lot of people in like 2000, 2003 stopped home video cameras because like iPhones came out and things like that, like cell phones that had video cameras.
Yeah.
But like, the 90s, everybody in the 80s, 90s, they had like home video cameras, high-8 cameras, whatever. They filmed everything, right?
Yeah.
And then at some point, early 2000s, nobody bought them anymore. Nobody bought like home video cameras. The Lugaveres kept buying them and they kept shooting everything. And so, literally, from when Max is like 3 or 4 years old, all the way through, he's just filming his family constantly filming everything. So there was just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, I mean, truly thousands of hours of just like at dinner, like just nothing going on, just sitting at dinner eating. And like it was wild. So I don't think it to him filming his mom felt like a thing he like had to do. It just felt like a thing that he always was doing. Was like, oh, I just want to film with my mom. Him and his brothers walk around Central Park, like just tons of random footage. And then I think in that process, there was a shift in her and it happened to get sort of captured. And then it became a point where he had to remember, I have to keep filming. I've done this my whole life. I have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And that's where it got really crazy to me. I mean, I don't do that. I don't film 99% of my life.
Well, that's probably a healthy way to to live.
Yeah, yeah. I just don't have it. As a film person, I'm
Yeah.
like, I need to leave work at work,
You got experience life, not film it, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And
But in
he
this
just
case,
happened to be that guy,
yeah.
you know?
In this case, there's like it's an extra element to this is his what he does in his life. So you
Mhm.
brought up something interesting that's a kind of a theme in these interviews that I do is that because people tell personal stories, right? And they sometimes they have to like step away from it for a year or so, or sometimes they because they have no perspective, right? And the rule number one, you got to tell a story. There's got to be a thematic story
Yeah,
there. It can't just be your own kind of part of the pun, like pardon the phrase, but your own wanky kind of tale, right? Like nobody
yeah,
cares,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so that seems to what happened with him, where like he is smart enough to go, wait a minute, I'm too close to this. I need someone, I need another set of eyes,
yeah.
trust eyes, and that's when you came along, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think a big part of it, and I can now that this is done, I can fully relate to his mindset. And now that I've experienced what I experienced in my own life, I can experience or I can relate to his mindset of overwhelming fear, which is, am I cutting the right things? Am I cutting the wrong things? And the natural fear all of us have to put a band-aid over the rough spots. So to me, the film came alive by showing how real and hard dealing with dementia is. Whereas his version, it was just good things. It was all good things. So all like the nighttime struggles, her getting lost in the bed, like all the things that Kathy really dealt with were removed from the film.
Mhm.
Because it was like, out of fear. Like I don't want my mom looking bad.
But at the same
Nobody
time,
wants to
I'm
show.
sure there was repeated story beats occurring where like
Yeah,
you show something once, you don't need to keep repeating a certain moment, I guess, that she's dealing with.
exactly. Exactly. And also we laugh about it so much now, but I had to cut Max out of a lot of the movie too, because it was a lot of times like, Max going off and doing stuff. And that's why it was 3 hours long. Because I was like, if I got to choose between you on screen doing something or your mom on screen doing something, I'm gonna choose your mom every time. And that was the only way we got it down from like 3 hours to like an hour 40 is because I had to cut a lot of things he had shot out, unfortunately. There's some tremendous, I mean, they did like a whole trip to like Europe. It's amazing footage, but it just made the film like, so long. So I had to bite the bullet and chop it up.
So you said that you worked on this for 3 years. I'm assuming you're doing other things. You're like doing some work stuff, pay the bills stuff, and then you're kind of
Yeah. We did some. I mean, I had to do other stuff in the meantime, but I've done my best to manage multiple projects for most of my career. So I'm kind of used to like the first half of the day working on one thing, the second half of the day working on another thing, and one of them pays the bills and the other one is what fulfills me. And when you can figure out that rhythm, that flow, then that's how you make the best work as an artist. So that was the only way that I could make this movie.
And you said you just met him one time?
Yeah, I mean, I've met him so many times now, but when I started on the film,
Gotcha.
I after a couple months into editing, every 4 or 5 months I'd fly out to LA because I'm in Philadelphia area, so it's the other side of the country, right?
Yeah.
Every couple months I would fly out there, we'd meet up, get some dinner, talk about, or we got 40 minutes so far. How do we feel about it? Like what are we missing? What do we want to do?
Yeah.
And he was just the best. He was so supportive. And he was so understanding of what I was trying to do, which was like, no disrespect, but I'm starting over because I don't have the same vision you have. And I want to do it this way and you want to go that way. And he
Yeah.
was like, do what you got to do. Like he totally got it. And that requires so much courage and trust. It's easy for me as like, it's easy for me as a filmmaker to be like, trust me, I got you. But when if you, I mean, I don't know how you would feel, man, but like if you filmed your whole life and gave it to somebody you met one time and be like, make the movie about my life.
Yeah.
That's required. Like you would probably be like, before we should definitely have like
Yeah.
100 meetings before you start.
But that said, I think that it can't be me who's making it. Someone else has to make. If you're gonna, someone's making a movie about you, you
Yeah.
can't make your movie. Someone's got to make your movie, right? So
Yeah, exactly. So
I think he was smart enough to realize that. So when did you know the film was done? When did you know the film was over? Like you had a final cut.
um so I make documentaries different than narrative feature films or narrative short films or anything. Like to me, when I'm watching raw footage, I immediately go like I immediately tag it mentally when I'm watching a scene and I go, that's the last shot, or that's the opening shot, or this is the turning point, or
Okay.
this is like you just start like and probably a lot of people do this, like what are the turning point moments. So for me, I knew how it was going to open. I figured that out immediately upon watching the home videos. I was like, oh, I need to understand everything about who Max is and who Kathy is in the first 2 minutes. And I'm going to do that with just home video. So we're going to exist only in home video. And I knew that the very last footage that they had filmed, which is in Washington Heights, that was truly the end of the footage of Kat. That's like the last time that they have footage of her. And it's such a beautiful moment of them going back to the park that they grew up. She would take him to when he was a toddler. Such a really fun moment. And I watched that and I just they have this gorgeous sunset and I just was like, this is the last frame. We're gonna end a hard movie to watch because of how real it is with the most beautiful moment in the whole film. That's where we're gonna end it. We're not gonna end on a dark note. We're gonna end on a good note.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, I put them on my timeline. This is how it opens. This is how it closes. Once I had everything in the middle filled in, that's when I knew we've got a movie here.
Gotcha. So you found the bread and you just made the sandwich, basically.
Exactly. There was, in my mind, there was no other way this opened, and there was no other way this ended.
That's a fantastic like nugget of story of like putting a film together because
Yeah.
because a lot of times these films you don't know how to end it. So you might
Yeah.
as well start with the hardest part, right? And
Yeah.
then what you did.
Just
And
yeah.
then what you did.
Just figure out what is the ending first, and then just work backwards, you know?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like, but at the same time, you kind of abandoned the film. This is what they say. Like, you kind of, yeah, first of all, and as everybody says that, you don't finish the film, you abandon it because it's like, you kind of have to move on, right? You kind of have to,
Yes.
like,
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is a long time for me, but this is nothing compared to how long Max has been working on
yeah,
this. So for Max's own sanity, we had to be like, we're done.
yeah,
I mean, you can only work on a movie once you hit 10 years on a movie, you gotta just be like, okay, you know. He's
yeah,
like a
exactly.
young man in this one now, in the film, and he's got like gray hair now. So it's like it's
Yeah,
like a
because you gotta move on, right?
yeah, you gotta live your life. But you know, the really great thing is everything that makes Max who he is today. I mean, he has millions of followers. I mean, he's a best-selling author. Like it is, everything has changed in his life because of everything that happened in this movie. So many people often are like asking Max, like, how'd you get started? Like, what got you into the idea of like being a health expert and like journalist? And it's like this, you're gonna see it of somebody starting to look things up and go, I think I have a good thing going here. And that's really cool to see a bit of like his origin story.
So this is a big deal. Like, this is not like it's a cliche, but this is not an ordinary feature documentary. This is a big deal. This is a huge film. Right?
Yeah, this is capturing, you know, the moments that everything changed and what set him on the path that he's on now.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever seen that before. And that's really cool.
So what did you guys think? Our audience, we send the feedback to you, what the audience has to think. What did you guys think what the audience had to say about your film? Because it seems like you're just kind of starting out before the podcast, you're saying you're starting out your kind of promotional and it's getting in the festivals. I see screens on your website. So what did you guys think
Yeah.
about what the audience had to say?
Uh, Getting the reaction video was just so cool. I loved it. It was validating, you know. It's like when you're working on something for so long on closed doors and NDAs are signed and no
Yeah.
one's allowed to talk about anything. And it starts to become this like secret project that's just like a weight on around your shoulders that you're carrying.
Mm.
And then, you know, there's just like this day where you open the door and you let strangers in just for a quick minute and they shut it. And you never ever really, like, as a filmmaker, the only thing that we get sometimes with social media, you see it, but that's also a crap shoot.
Yeah.
But you never really get to know what people thought of something. You
Yeah.
can read a review, but reviews are often written by critics, and critics can't by nature love everything or they would be a terrible critic. So it's like, well, great. What do critics think? That's fine. I'm more so interested in like, do people get something out of this? Like, what's the everyday person get out of it? And so having like a list of like everyday people watch it and give their feedback, that was really like uplifting and like re-inspired us so much because we were like, okay, this is good. People liked it. Okay, I think we're doing good here. Let's really lean into this now. You know, so much so that like we are, you know, it's the end of March now, but in less than a month, we're going to theaters for, you know, a domestic theater release. And we're going to go on an 8-week theater tour across the US, which is so exciting. And then we're going to be releasing it online. And, you know, I'm feeling really good about like the whole release based on the feedback we've gotten so far. People have really come on board. We had a private screening last fall for it in LA. And, you know, Bruce Willis's wife, came out and gave it a glowing review to her millions of followers, which was
Mhm.
awesome. And we have a lot of people who are really connecting, you know. Gerard Butler recently watched it, and his mother, I believe, had Lewy body dementia as well. So I know Max and him were talking about it. And I just hope that, you know, there's the idea that I hope a film is successful, which
Yeah.
is for most of the work that I'm a part of. I'm like, oh, I hope it does well and makes a lot of money. This movie, I feel like I really just want as many people to watch as possible because it's pretty life-changing stuff inside of it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, congratulations on the film. Congratulations. Thanks for telling the story, the origin story, like of yourself and kind of jumping in and making the film. And yeah, it's fantastic. It's a really great film. I liked it immensely when I first saw it. And yeah, I just wish you guys the ultimate success with it. And yeah, tell Max I said hello and just wish you guys the best.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.